This is Senate Appropriations, and we're going to be taking testimony in S 213. And we have the reporter and chair of the committee, Senator Bray, who is here to give us a walkthrough of the bill. And because it carries an appropriation, a fairly substantial one, we're going to have to decide how we want to move forward, because if we move this forward, then we are going to have to reduce the amount of funding that we currently have available to support the rest of the state budget, or we can look at the extent to which we have the policy can move forward, and then we look at the funding as part of the overall 25 budget process. So I don't know how well the bill would lend itself to moving the language forward, but furthering the funding that would go with it. So that's going to be our challenge, I guess, for today. So Senator Bray, I know that's a lot of work here, and I know that it's trying to be a proactive response to the flooding experience that we've had, what we anticipate in the future, and how we can undertake regulations or planning or whatever to help us mitigate future damage experience. So I will let you take it from here in terms of kind of the highlights, as well as the funding, and if you can help us, are there things that we can move forward that would be good policy, and then somehow then determine, as we're working through the budget process and the revenue process, the appropriation that would go with it. So that's going to be our challenge.
I do have from joint fiscal note, which was refined and just issued. So I don't know if it's distracting to pass that out now or hold it and talk about the bill first. I don't know that.
Yeah.
Good. So
Why are we getting corners cut off? Is that something new? This is the second document I've had.
Yeah, transportation today.
It was on this
Yeah.
side, so maybe it's,
austerity measures.
I have no idea.
Cutting corners.
We'll be cutting quarters off. Oh God, you're clever. All right.
So we're trying to keep the costs down. We're cutting corners from day one. So for the record, Senator Chris Gray, Addison County Chair, Natural Resources and Energy, here to talk about Bill S 213 and activating the regulation on wetlands, river corridor development and dam safety. So just a 60-second high-level recap. We have climate change is driving, everyone know, more severe rain events, and those more severe rain events stress watersheds, particularly because there's a larger volume of water to move through, and because of that larger volume, you get higher, not just more volume, but more speed, and they become destructive. So the summer floods, we got a note from Doug Farnham, the total cost for the last summer is roughly $1 billion by the time we're all done. And so that's a monumental storm. I mean, I'm gonna pause and remind us, so easy to get caught in the numbers and statistics. Someone died drowning in their apartment, I believe, in that storm. And we have loss of life in Irene as well. There are hundreds of homes that are no longer habitable. There will make hundreds more people out of home. There are businesses that are closed. We talked to someone who is traumatized enough that each time it rains, she is in tears.
Maybe that's why we've got to start putting some increases in our mental health system.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
the governor is happening.
Right.
No, we certainly appreciate, the human dimensions of this.
And it's going to be an ongoing misery for years, actually. The recovery is long and slow. So
I'm not sure
I think
we'll be
that-
covered before we have another. That's what I worry about.
So what's going on out there that's, how can we get our arms around it? The challenge is that, river systems are so vast. So the Lake Champlain Basin includes 136 towns in it. When
Well,
our
60% of the,
Yeah.
state
It's-
watersheds go with it.
Everyone in this committee is in the Champlain Basin, including Senator Stevens. And the only counties not in it are Essex and Wyndham. So it's vast, it extends over 36 jurisdictions. We have piecemeal municipal level regulations, mostly just for flood hazard areas, the floodplains next to rivers, and that's because the municipality is not, National Flood Insurance Program, it's not available to a municipality that lacks flood hazard area bylaws. So, there are flood hazard bylaws for many towns, roughly 90%, but river corridor bylaws for only about 10%. And 80% of the damage of these storms is in a river corridor. And just to remind people about river corridors, so river corridors, sort of shoulder to shoulder, the space that over a extended period of time, the river will occupy. They meander, they move,
Do they ever fill up?
Sure. Sorry, okay. Fill up here, and shift over there. I mean, they're very dynamic. But the point is that it's, scientifically, we know that if you build in that space, you are putting yourself in harm's way. And so the whole goal of the bill is to say, how can we get ourselves out of harm's way, knowing that we've already developed, along rivers and because of the historical value of being on a river. So we tackle it in 4 different ways in the bill. We look at the river corridors themselves, which are, the state has actually been working on mapping, but there's very little regulation as to what happens in those spaces. We also look at flood hazard areas where we have only mapping for about 20% of the floodplains, and quite a few of them are well out of date. They're being renewed. There are FEMA maps that the river is no longer even in the floodplain that is on the map that moved so far. So those are out of date. We also look at wetlands because they are, the state has over time, since the colonial days, lost a third of its wetlands, and they serve a huge function as a natural sponge that slows and brings water. There are wetland towns of Middlebury and floodplains that, during Irene, they estimated it saved Middlebury about $3.5 million in damage because that water arrived, spread out, slowed down, and came through town much more, a modern, slowly, with less damage. And then the last thing is there are over 1,000 dams in the state, and we are in the precarious position of only having 1 permanent full-time employee in charge of dam safety in the state, 2 limited service folks. And so we're working on 2 fronts. One, we need to complete the second phase of dam safety rules, which should be finished next year. And part of the reason that dragged out is because they are so resource constrained. Finish those rules and have a more robust and inspection program for dams around the state.
So I have a question, Senator, and I have it in a stack here. I just wanted to take the joint fiscal note and make sure the Secretary of A&R submitted what she thought it would take for personnel to support the bill. And I know that had been kind of evolving. And so my question is, does the fiscal note and the money that is referenced here and positions, is that consistent with the latest communication we have from Secretary Moore as to what it would take to operationalize the bill?
As we finalize the bill, we said, this is the schedule, et cetera, et cetera. We said, tell us what the resource needs are to stick with that schedule, which basically rolls out to 2028.
So what we have.
We get the numbers back. And so you see people allocated for each of those different areas, wetlands, flood hazard areas, river corridors, and things.
So the fiscal impact then, And then there's study, so there's the actual appropriations. And, could you clarify, and because we have certainly been, very, very strongly cautioned by our pro tem, to add additional work that would fall to legislative council or to joint fiscal. And, my question is, out of all these different, activities and study committees, is there, commitment of staff resources from either ledge council or joint fiscal?
From Ledge Council, but you know, I apologize that since hearing that in chairs yesterday, I just forgot to go back through and see if we could look to either remove or reorganize or treat differently any kind of study committee in order to streamline the bill and workload on legislative council. There are two in here, so I'd be happy to go through that and then the next day, today actually, and get back and say.
And the other question that I
There's an
have,
opportunity.
and other members maybe, and that is when we're getting into very scientific areas. My question is, most legislators don't have a body of expertise to bring to a study group.
Yeah.
And yet, it seems like we have, a legislator from the House and the Senate on a number of these study groups. And I was just wondering what the thinking is, relative to, legislative membership on what I would view, would be much more science-based, technical, I don't know, hydrologist or whatever, kinds of, experiences and expertise you would actually want to do that study. Maybe Senator Lyons in her former lifetime as an academic would have those skills, but I would submit most of us would not. And it's a matter of asking what the thinking was in terms of that membership. And the reason I'm thinking about it is last year we had the bill on the treatment of lakes.
Yeah.
And, it raised the question about, we had a lot of political presence, but we didn't have a lot of science and
Yeah.
technical expertise. And so it's just with that in mind that I'm raising the question. Obviously, it's not, the cost is relatively modest, certainly would have to be accommodated by the legislative budget. But I was wondering in terms of the role of legislators as your committee envisioned them.
Sure. So for instance, section 10, a study committee on state administration national flood insurance program. So because that program is so vital, it is for most people the only opportunity to get the flood insurance. We thought it was important to support that work. I mean, I'll back up a step to say, well, what's the work that's going on? As I was saying, our maps, were the first phase of the bill. The bill goes through three phases in general. The first, let's map things so we know what's literally out there. Second, let's bring these maps to the municipalities themselves because local knowledge is essential in terms of ground truthing those maps and interpreting them because they will have an impact, for instance, on infill development. And then the third phase is when there's either a new bylaw or a new rule that has to be implemented. So because of the breadth of the impact, we felt as though it was important to stay abreast of how what kind of discussion and recommendations there were to build a better national flood insurance program.
And, okay,
Or
yes.
access to it, actually.
Right.
Senator Starr, then we can move to Senator Brewer.
Yeah, what's in this bill, if it rained like it did this past summer, next summer, what's in there that steers in any direction
Yeah.
that we aren't already headed in doing?
So on the river corridor side of things, we're not for the most part, regulating river corridors. So development ends up going on in river corridors, and as you can imagine, you end up with damage to things built in the river corridor when the river corridor.
What's there that got damaged? What I've seen got damaged is here in town. State Street, Main Street, down on Bolton Flat. I didn't see anything get too damaged down there. Once we got the water there, but get the water through this community and bury. What are we doing to get the water through town?
So there's two pieces to it. In terms of probably in where we've already committed to development, dense development right on the banks of a river. This is highly armored. The Mike Klein, the former river fluvial geomorphologist for the state of Vermont for 30-something years, refers to this as the Montpelier Canyon. You know, like there's that river is not going to move. There's a mountain there. Everything's developed right up to here. We do our best to constrain the river and keep it there. A lot of the adjustments related to river corridor stuff is to access places like the Bolton Flats, or there are areas that did serve as floodplains that are no longer accessible to them, or to not develop in floodplains so that you put yourself in harm's way. So right now we don't have those river corridor rules to guide development broadly applied around the state. And then the state also has the bill has their developing model floodplain bylaws. So that's again, flood hazard area bylaws that make you eligible for FEMA support and also for National Flood Insurance Program. The states, they are piecemeal. There are 274 and they vary location by location by location. Because flooding is more severe, the state would like to move to a more prudent level, higher elevations, for instance, or hardening of buildings. And they would like to administer a single floodplain bylaw because it would make it much, one, it would be more protective, and two, it makes them way more efficient instead of having 274 different floodplain bylaws to administer. So it will, there's a phase in. The short answer is, I can't tell you that something will be better or next summer.
5 years from now, I look, our last major flood was 12.
Yeah.
We got the same thing right over again. We had, 8, and we had 15 years to be working on this, and we're in worse shape this, I think, than last.
So I wanted to go to the
Yeah,
next
I
part.
would disagree. And the reason I say that is because during the cleanup that I participated in, there were better scenarios than there were during Irene because of changes we made after Irene. What I really, really appreciate about this bill is that it's going at this from 3 or 4 basic perspectives. But just take the dams. I don't know about you, but I was watching the Wrightsville Dam
Yeah,
in
everybody,
real time.
national news.
Right, and we were all watching it, and then when we were all absorbed on the level, people started to say, well, actually, we're not sure if the dam itself might not rupture. So the work this does on dams alone is worth the price of admission. 5 years down the road, theoretically, all of our dams have been re-examined. We've got people who are expert in that. But I wanted to, hang on, I just want to make sure I say this. So I really think our number one priority this year is flooding, flood mitigation, and helping the people who were damaged. So we've done good work helping the people who were damaged, but so far we haven't done, and I'm not including this bill yet because we haven't passed it, but we haven't passed anything that would help us down the line. And so Bobby's question is right on point. I think this bill does major work so that the next time this flooding happens, we can point to it and say, we did that and there's a result. There isn't a new development in the floodplain that we're having to buyout. There isn't a broken dam. There isn't dispute about the right of way in the floodplain and the ability to build there without regulation. So I'm very appreciative of the bill, and I'm hoping the committee will, in its thinking about priorities, remember that flooding is our stated number one priority.
Okay, other questions or comments? I'm still struggling with, to do this. And we know over the years, we have developed in wetlands. We know that, outside of Fernandville, that all used to be wetlands. It's been filled in and our wetlands serve as a sponge. And we see that along Route 2 all the time, all those meadows and so forth. And so the more we attempt to constrict, or the ways in which we manage that flow of water, like the bigger culvert in Brandon, for example, that avoided the flooding that occurred there because our infrastructure isn't sized adequately for some of the volumes that we're experiencing. North Troy got hammered, I believe, with this. So everybody's having, the question becomes one of how we, recognizing what we've already done to the environment, how we've already created some of the risk, and so many of our villages are all on the river. I mean, we're either hill towns or we are river towns, and the question becomes not, 100 years from now, it's probably if. Chris, I'm just wondering how we deal with this from a fiscal perspective, relative to moving a bill out before we have the revenues to support it. And that's sort of a timing issue that I have. Are there, and I'll go to Senator Sears in terms of, and I'm not suggesting we vote on this today, because I think we need to have more time. This is pretty significant commitment of resources. It's sort of right up there with TMDL for Lake Champlain and what it took, and resources associated. So,
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because just like the TMDL, it's a decades-long effort. Trying to address the kind of stress that we're gonna be under in perpetuity from rain and flood events, given our current settlement patterns, this will be work that will literally, go on for decades.
yeah, we have to.
So I appreciate that PMDL perspective. I think in terms of trying to manage the costs, I know it's a sensitive year for already a lot of budget pressure. The total request from ANR is 16 full-time positions and totaling plus appropriations, so bringing 495. It's given reality on project management. I'm assuming they would have to sort of let them flush out, and so it may be a phased cost. I don't know how you find 16 people quite so fast. So maybe there's some wiggle room in terms of not having the full expense in year one, but I wouldn't want to assume that. I mean, I want A&R to.
It may not, but we would be naive not to understand the full cost once it's annualized.
Okay.
So Senator Sears.
So I totaled up and I don't know if I've got everything, but I'm looking at just under $8 million in between one-time and ongoing expenses. I'm also looking at, my committee is working on a climate recovery fund bill. Seems to me that these costs are clearly due to the damages done, and that it would fit neatly into when there is a settlement, that money would go into funding this type of program. It seems to me that it really does fit together. If you look at 250, what the hell is it?
259.
259. And this bill, they do fit together because it's clearly climate related. And there would be presumably, and right now we're working on the final stretches of that bill. Hopefully it would pass. And I think that we could put in language that would allow that to be part of the, Michael can work, this is doing both bills, so I think it would be easy to
Recognize that.
recognize that the funding would come from recovery of climate.
But that, the question is, the timing of that relative to moving forward
Well,
on dams
but-
and stuff.
But if we put the money out now, what do we give up in the budget? It does $8 million.
Well, that's why I wanna, calibrate that with the budget and what we have for revenues. So,
And I take Senator Sears' point, and if it's a point about the relatively distant future. Because if we pass that bill, I believe from our testimony, it's gonna be locked up in court for, the foreseeable future, call it 5 to 10 years. So it may be that eventually we could switch over funding somehow, but for my part, I can't see waiting another day to fund these efforts. I understand there are competing pressures, but we did come in with a commitment to all the flooded communities that we would not only make them whole, but we would try to prevent them from being.
we didn't make them whole.
But we would try to.
You're right.
And that we would try to make sure that they didn't get hit again, to the extent humanly possible. So I feel like this bill of what's taking shape in the legislature is the most far-reaching, most systematic. So if we're beginning the process now of prioritizing it, I would make that argument.
I don't disagree that it may take time, but it's, the point is, we, the taxpayers, are the victims. And you're asking us to pay as victims rather than the companies that caused the damage.
No, I'm saying,
No, you are saying we go ahead now and pay, and it's taxpayers' dollars, there's no way of getting around it.
Yeah.
We either raise taxes or we cut somebody else. And I'm saying that you should let those companies pay. And if it takes 10 years, it takes 10 years. The Exxon Mobil case is ongoing. They finally have gotten a resolution to go back to the state, I believe. That was a testimony of the Attorney General. So, I mean, these things may not take 5 to 10 years, and other states are doing the same.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be similar pressures was put onto the opiate group, the cigarette companies, and others.
but Dick, I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying. You're not saying we should wait and not spend any money on flood mitigation
And if
because,
we do, it should be borrowed money,
Pending reimbursement.
pending reimbursement.
well, but I mean, we don't know for a fact we'll be reimbursed. So I can see that we might, in our minds.
I see no way that, I may not be alive when it happens. I see no way that these companies are gonna avoid what they knew and what they've gone through. Given the issues nationwide, worldwide, and examples of the tobacco industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and other industries that have been required through class action suits. The Superfund, cleaned up the Bennington landfill. But it took in all kinds of different people. This one is just zeroed in on the large producers of oil.
So I guess that what we're talking about is one of timing and the extent to which we move some of this forward and then seek the benefit of, like we did with tobacco, we continue to fund healthcare costs and whatever, but until we got money. So I think the issue is,
But my issue is to try to link those two bills.
well, we certainly can in anticipation if that happens, that on those ongoing costs relative to staffing and so forth, I think absolutely we should make the connection that you're talking about. I think the question becomes one of what we do over that 5-year or 10-year period relative to dam safety, relative to the ways that we can reduce the environmental impact and the economic impact and not engage in development that in fact actually For me, when I went to the outer barrier island of Duck a few years ago, I was absolutely amazed that they were still building houses.
Yeah.
Eve to eve on a barrier island, and my first response was, no one should pay any dime or any insurance because of where, but that they're building now. Our villages were built 100 years ago when our rivers were major transportation corridors. So I guess my point is, we have to deal with what we've done historically, and then we have to be very much more careful about where we develop now or in the future. So the question we're gonna have here, and we're not gonna be able to, I don't wanna take action right now. We've gotta figure out how we can move this in a way that, because I think we're really struggling with, we're hearing the judiciary's backed up, kids can't be free for adoption, because of cases backing up or whatever. And so how do we fit what we're doing here, and what we're gonna have for revenues and how we want it? But I would say that, I would say this money, it's expensive, but you think about the money that we've just spent.
Yeah.
And we've created the impression that somehow the state's gonna be able to intervene and make everybody somehow financially compensated for these damages. And we are not gonna have that capacity to do even what we did for the July flood, to put it honestly. And we're seeing more and more requests for funding and relief. So we're creating expectations that historically in the future, we are not gonna be able to continue to meet.
Any of that money that we talked about falling back because it wasn't gonna be able to be spent by a certain date.
Yeah, well, that's been spent by about 10 different ways, depending on the committees in this building.
Even what they clawed, we don't even know what may have to fall back.
They're not gonna claw back a dime of the ARPA money, we're making sure of that.
It's gonna all be,
It's gonna be spent.
No, he's talking about us clawing it back for other uses.
Oh, it's all been appropriated,
Yeah, we can't clock.
we can't call it back. It's already, and what we do have, and what we did have in the budget adjustment was, in September, we might be able to pick up $1 million here, 200,000 here, et cetera, and look at what we have available. And I'll tell you in the budget adjustment that we pulled out, the House said that money should go to meet housing needs and housing development. So I don't know whether we'll have 10 million, 10,000, or 10 cents, to put it bluntly. Because that whole process of looking at what funds are gonna be available and need to be freed up and used for other purposes so that they're not taken back by the federal government is not gonna occur until September. We won't know. So that's where we,
Could I just, a clarification on the fiscal note? Senator Sear said for number of 8 million, I thought it was like under 5 million.
4.9.
Well, there's ongoing expenses and there's one time.
yeah,
Was your 8 million like added several years together?
No, I thought I added the fiscal.
it's 495,
5, 2, 4, and 20,000.
No, if you keep reading.
That's the
think those
breakdown.
numbers are
Those are the
in-
breakdown.
Oh, okay.
Those are the
So I
breakdown.
added them twice.
You did.
Okay, well,
You get a higher number though.
I get a higher number. But
So
the point is, it's still,
It's
A lot of
still,
money.
yeah, it is.
there.
there is a
so
million.
if we can find some way to link those two bills, at least knowing that if there is a recovery,
Oh, absolutely.
money would
absolutely.
go
Yeah.
to the money that we're contemplating spending here, whatever it is. 5 million would be,
And I have to say, at least my understanding, and from what we've had with other discussions, like the dam in Morrisville, that we need to deal with the dam safety issue, even if we didn't have climate change. because we've got aging dams and they are at risk.
The activation is way down.
And so some of this is in fact
Yeah.
work that needs to be done just from a public safety perspective because of the age of some of our dams.
But it's exacerbated by,
Oh, sure.
we can't.
Well, I have this, at this point, the weather's changed and I totally get that. I sit in a community, in my county in Johnson. And, a piece of what's happened in the last 30 years, maybe 35 years, is in Johnson, there was a tailings pile for a talc mill that they took all of it, put it in the meadows that are ball fields now, and put soil over the top of it. And they raised up what was floodplain by about 4 to 5 feet. It's now
With
backing-
toxic material.
With toxic material, it's now backing up into to the village of Johnson more than it ever has before. What I don't see in here is where there's any forward thinking to help the community say, what have we done to fill in the floodplain? They built a dollar store, they built and when we go to have a conversation about the store in the community, and this will be unpopular at this table, when we go to have a conversation about the store, and the first question out of the select board, when we've got Commerce Agency, Natural Resources Agency, all of the federal people standing in the parking lot at the store. Can we move the store out of the floodplain and create room for that? And the answer is no, we can't get any federal money to move it out of the floodplain. And if we have to go through Act 250, it'll be 5 years before you get a store in the village because it'll take 3 years for us to get through Act 250. And I sit there and go, well, that kills that because we aren't gonna go 5 years without a store. And so there's a huge frustration for me around this. Granted, I think the weather has changed and that, but we're doing some of this to ourselves. And I see there's future looking stuff in here about that, but nothing to help me mitigate the things that have already been done that are clearly back in.
I mentioned dollar store in your discussion.
The-
We're driving 22 out of New York from the New York Thruway to Bennington. The number of dollar stores.
One every 7 miles.
Oh, almost,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's part
So
of their
they,
marketing.
in the last, 5 years, they put storage units, which all flooded.
Yeah.
Storage units and the dollar store right in the middle of the floodplain in the most inappropriate spots.
I'm sure.
That would suggest we do need to look at development.
Mike wanted to
Um,
respond.
Yes,
I
sure.
just wanted to say, an overlooked part of this bill is a requirement that has no cost, but will probably do much of what Senator Westman is looking at. There's an ongoing process at A&R where they go out and they assess the river corridors and they look at things and what's appropriate for development. Part of what this bill is going to do is require them to identify flood mitigation projects. So they can put in a project, say, to address the talc erosion in Johnson, or they can put in additional floodplain in Middlebury on the Otter. So there will be, when you're standing in that parking lot 3 years from now, what can we do? There should be a plan that's available to the municipalities and the regional planning commission that said, hey, this is something that we can do and that we can fund that should reduce flood.
They already have that information, and if you have that meeting with them and you're standing in the middle of a village like Johnson, they will, I only point out the places they've already pointed out to us.
But it'll be part of the plan, because the regional plan has to incorporate these plans under the Federal Clean Water Act. And so it will be something that the regional planning commissions, the municipalities will start to plan for as part of their planning requirements.
So I'm just looking at the clock, and this has precipitated a lot of discussion. we've got the bill, we can look at it. If you would please look at any sections related to
Right.
obligation of ledge council or joint fiscal office.
There are three study committees totaling 20,000, so I'll go back through it.
It's not the 20,000,
Yeah,
that's just
it's
it, the per diem.
Impact on resource.
Yes, resources, our staff are no different than dollars.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
so,
If I may, in terms of the costs, out of that 495, one of the million is for the revolving loan fund for dam, repair. So I think, as I understand, it within the government's budget, it's not that still leaves more money to be found.
no, I think it really is, we need to recognize, we've got some one time here, and then what we have for ongoing, obligation for the work that I think everybody is sort of anticipating is ahead of us. So,
Another thing, I feel remiss if I didn't say this, when we were talking with Dan and pushing along to do, work on forefronts in a timely way, and there was a give and take about dates for deliverables. Like we said, we're trying to respect the need you have to move at a pace that works for you, and we also want to make sure that you're adequately resourced. So it's not my job to guarantee anything, but I said that I would speak up on behalf of the fact that if they're very concerned if it's anything, if it's one-time funding for a 50-year program.
that is, we don't do that. The
I,
governor's budget may do it in places, but we're not gonna do that.
well,
And-
I would be remiss if I didn't say it while I was.
we would be remiss if we didn't really look at the full annualized cost, because that's a common way of getting the camel's nose in the budget tent. And that is, oh, let's just do it for the last quarter, and that's cheap, but then the next year, if it's ongoing, rolls around, so, that's why we're trying to be honest about what we're committing to here. And not just for part of a year or whatever, if it's ongoing, then let's be honest with ourselves here. Cause we're gonna have to accommodate it, and, we've lived with a lot of those short-term decisions that end up costing a lot of money. So, but if you could just.
Yes, I'll go through those.
Um,
My hope is that when we have a storm and it's $1 billion, that we will actually be smart enough to figure out things that reduce damage, and the program will be paying for it, itself. But we'll take time to get there for sure.
Yeah,
Thank
all right,
you.
thank you. Now we're way behind schedule. We'll go to liquor and lottery.
Good afternoon, how are you? Senator Sears,
What?
how are you?
Good.
Senators, good to see you, I will be brief.
And Senator Bruce said he has to leave at 3.
Yeah.
I just wanna watch. Yeah, we understand, so.
Thank you.
Nice to
Sorry,
see you.
there's nothing worse.
Senator. No, nothing.
My daughter.
Oh, okay, well, drive safely. So don't stop at a Family Dollar. Or a liquor store.
On that either, or you can stop, just don't,
Don't buy anything in here.
or don't,
Oh, please.
So thank you for, coming. Obviously,
My pleasure.
your budget is unlike most of what we
Correct.
see.
Our budget is, okay, great. Our finance director is here. I'm a believer. My name is Wendy Knight, for the record, Commissioner of the Department of Liquor and Lottery. I believe strongly that commissioners and secretaries should be able to generally go over their budget. So I've asked Lisa to be here in case there are any detailed questions, but it's a pretty simple budget. I'm gonna be brief and walk you through it, if
And
that's
it
okay.
doesn't, and it's special funds and you actually generate revenue.
And we generate money, right? So we actually bring money into the state
And
as
we could
opposed.
use more.
Yes,
You
I'm,
have about 50 million that would help. us.
unfortunately, I do not have 50 million that I can offer today.
No.
No, well, we'll see what March Madness brings.
Right, there we go. Okay, would you like me to start, the
Yes.
summary? So very briefly, our, budget this year we are focusing on the fundamentals, right? So the department last year, we obviously passed sports wagering, so we're focusing on running two businesses. We run the Division of Liquor Control and the Vermont Lottery, which, as we all know, are enterprise funds. They generate money, so running an agency, running businesses, we're focusing on making sure that we're increasing revenue, maintaining our costs, being cost conscious, focusing on making sure that we're keeping those in check, and then being innovative and efficient in the way we do things.
Well, I have to say, from at least from what I experienced, the rollout of online sports wagering went well. Senator Sears, do you have a different opinion? But
No,
it seems like
overwhelmed.
it went and I think
Yes.
was it your comment that we actually did a different way of
Generating money,
and
yes.
and that seemed to be actually worked pretty effectively in our favor.
Correct. So if you remember from last year, what we, the industry wanted us to do was to put a 20% tax rate in statute. And we argued that we could actually generate more money for the state if we allowed the department to do a revenue share, and we did that. So we have a 31%, 31%, and 33% from the three operators. So in the first 7 weeks of sports wagering, the revenue share to the state is $1.9 million. Now you can do the math. If we had, you all had agreed to what the operators wanted and put the 20% in the tax rate, the amount of revenue the state would have generated would have been significantly less. So congratulations for making the right move with the revenue share.
The other point though is that most of the majority of the bets on the Super Bowl were about 15 minutes before the game started. Which is, that's amazing, technical, be able to generate all that and still get them in at the same
And
time.
not crashing the system.
Not crashing the system.
Yeah, and they did a significant amount of testing. So in terms of the activity, we're looking closely at the out-of-state because out-of-state wagers are playing a huge role in sports wagering activity in Vermont. So we're looking at that.
Out of staters.
Out-of-state, it's tourists. So Vermont's a tourist economy.
People
People
were
come to
here
Vermont.
to ski on Super Bowl Sunday and they were betting on the platform.
They probably even betting on how long Taylor Swift and what's his name embraced.
Unfortunately,
That's not
Ours
an
didn't.
allowable.
That's not allowed.
Yeah,
Oh,
the offshore betting
Right.
allowed that.
Right,
oh, I see.
right. We
Yeah.
have to actually bet on something related to the game.
Oh.
So sports wagering is going well. The revenue projection for FY 25 is 7 million. Now, we may be able to say it's 8 million after we see what March Madness, but at this point, it's very cyclical. So even though we launched very strong and we see good numbers right now,
That
that's
was at
because
peak time.
it's peak time. It was the weekend of the playoffs and the NFL and football really generates and drives sports wagering activity. We're seeing basketball, obviously, in terms of the sport that's being bet on the most now, and we'll see that through March, but then we'll see a drop.
So,
yes.
it seems like the next one's outreach and marketing, but the three operators did so much advertising and marketing in
Mhm.
advance of the startup on television and stuff. It
Yep.
so it's not only did we obviously the revenue share agreement was, but we also didn't have to spend, I'm assuming that.
Correct.
All
We don't
funded
do
by the
any,
operators.
right.
So that was a tremendous amount of marketing and outreach that went into
Correct, and money that went into local advertising outlets.
yeah.
Media, radio, and that's typical for when a new business comes into a new market, right? So saw a lot of marketing pre-launch, wanting people to know that they were, available in Vermont, and we'll see that.
Go ahead.
One other question. So my memory is failing me on how we dealt with the amounts going to problem gambling. But in New York, Governor Hochul's budget they say it's $10 million, but I think they had more revenue than they anticipated.
Mhm.
So she's taking some of that money and using it elsewhere.
So
Did we put a percentage or? did
no,
we-
that's what the administration had argued for last year, was we recommended a percentage, a
Yeah.
5% of the
Oh, yeah.
adjusted gross revenue. And what the bill landed on was $250,000 that comes from the sports wagering enterprise, and that goes to problem gambling. In addition to $250,000 from Vermont Lottery, another enterprise fund that goes to the Department
So
of
we're
Mental
not
Health.
in the same percentage thing that New York was in.
No, we're not,
We're worried about that because
Yeah.
it was like uncut.
Well, now though, New York is, the governor's trying to cut it,
Oh.
and I think there's, even though they'll probably get more money
Mhm.
than they got last year because of the revenue that came in
I
on a
guess that was
percentage
prudent to do
basis.
too.
It looks like a lot, you know.
And in this year's budget, our budget in FY 25 includes $250,000 for Department of Mental Health for sports wagering, problem gambling.
But
Same as last year.
if a lot of those people are from out of state, they won't need help here, they'll need help when they get back home,
That's correct.
right? So,
Did you say there was 250s, one from
Yep,
lottery?
there's $250,000 that was in the bill, Act 63, and that's in our base budget here, for FY 25, the $250,000 from, sports wagering, and then as part of our, course of business with Vermont Lottery, we have an MOU in place with the Department of Mental Health. It used to be Howard Center, and last year we transferred
I
it.
remember years ago, it used to be somebody
So
else.
it's two, so it's 500.
So it's 500,000, because whether it's,
And had
whether
about
you're
one call a
approaching
year.
problem gambling from a sports wagering perspective or Vermont Lottery, we want to combine it. Now, there's different tactics, like Vermont Lottery people are listening to radio. If you're a sports bettor online, you're not gonna listen to radio, so there's different ways of reaching those audiences. So in terms of the rest of the budget, we did have, we have no new initiatives for FY 25. Again, we're focusing on fundamentals. We had some FEMA flooding, about $1.1 million that included some liquor inventory, the point of sale and hardware equipment that exist in the 802 Spirit stores, and then the disposal of some of that liquor. The federal government deems liquor flammable, and so we had 3 stores that were completely flooded: Johnson, Londonderry, and Montpelier, and then we had to pay to have that.
you're gonna drink it.
Can't drink it. Nope. Anytime water, you get storm water or wastewater touches the bottle, I mean,
It could bacteria.
Pretty gross.
Some of the water floating around, particularly when your wastewater system isn't functioning.
I would have thought
Yeah.
those people in Johnson would like to drink it.
Yeah, when their wastewater system isn't working, I'm sure,
That's true.
toxic chemicals and.
I'm happy.
Downstream.
Downstream.
Well, the sewage
Back up,
treatment
though.
plant is downstream from that, but
The backup was.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going.
Okay, so if I could, I would like to look at the ups and downs
Well, it
and
isn't too much
just
here.
walk you through this quickly, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
No, it's.
No?
Well,
Okay?
Just a big,
I
What do you
think it's
think?
pretty much the same. I mean, salaries, benefits. Cost allocated expenses. from-
Yes, we have a 3% increase. We were asked to do a 3% increase. We did that. There was a little additional from the ADS. Internal seat service fees, they weren't prepared before our budget was prepared, so there's a small amount additional, about 27,000 for that. We have a little request for the special funds, our surplus property funds and tobacco litigation funds. That's that first column on the left. The DLL, we have an education unit that educates our licensees. Money comes from the tobacco settlement fund. That has been underfunded for the last couple of years, so we're asking for $16,736 extra to cover salaries and an additional $20,000 for operating expenses for that fund. It's our investigators that do the work that allows the AG's office to settle and fund that.
And those are all
settlement.
incorporated though in the governor's proposed,
Yes, yeah.
so we don't need to
All of this is in the governor's recommended. So we have some MOUs, and then the enterprise funds are the liquor control, lottery, and then we have sports wagering. Our vacancy savings, this is the first time we've ever taken vacancy savings. FY '23, we had 5.1% in vacancies. We're only taking the 3.8%. We really rarely have vacancies. We only
So
have
is it
80 employees.
306?
That's the vacancy savings.
I understand.
Yes.
What you're saying is that's realistic.
That's realistic. It's under what we normally see. So you'll see the 250,000 is for the MOU for the Department of Mental Health. We are needing to do a little bit. We've incorporated our marketing for the tri-state lottery into this budget so that it's envisioned. We're about transparency, so we don't want that to be dealt with separately. We need to upgrade the Vermont Lottery website because we are running on a platform that will not be serviced in about 3 months. So we need a little funding for that. We've cut some money on our net operating by making sure that we're using contracting properly and wrapping up some projects. Our online licensing portal allowed us to get rid of another server. And so that's about it.
No, it's pretty straightforward. It's not-
Do you use attorneys from the AG's office?
We
or you
do.
have your own?
No, we have, our general counsel is an assistant attorney general, the AG's office.
And you get billed?
And we get billed, we pay, yep, it's through a contract, MOU. And I think we pay 60% of his legal aids or whatever they're called, clerks.
Okay.
So
Other questions? Okay, this is kind of a nice change.
good.
But you want to build a new warehouse, wouldn't that be a?
Yes, that's part of, well, it's not in this year's
Well, we
plan.
talked about it
Yeah,
for
we have.
100 years.
So what we're doing, well, actually, we actually do something about it. So I'm not as commissioner that just talks about it. So what we're doing is we're working with BGS. They're working on an RFP right now. It'll be a build to lease. We're looking for either a, brand new build or an existing space that can be reconfigured. We expect to have that RFP wrapped up in the next couple of months.
In any location or?
It will be in central Vermont, you need to be closer to a highway, so we will do a lease is the least expensive option to the state, and that seems to make sense, so that's what we're working on.
We put it in the armory in Waterbury.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's a
that's
spot.
Yeah, you got an armory and water here.
I believe that I won't say what I believe, because I'm on the record, and I just conjecture. Yes, we're looking in central Vermont, and right now we have a liquor warehouse that's about 30,000 per.
I know, it's been inadequate for long.
Yes,
Or
it
is
has.
Is that in Berlin?
No, it's right
Right down
down.
next to Department of Labor.
Yeah, next time, it's on a floodplain, and it's by there, but for the grace of God, that wasn't flooded during the July flood.
Mhm.
Because the water came up just
Yeah.
just at the base.
Yeah.
And it didn't come up into the warehouse. But it's a very old building, and we
Is
need,
it state owned?
yes, it is.
Yeah, it's pretty safe where it is, since the water stays up here because you can't get down to the point. Right, points up here by the bridge.
Oh, no, Associated General Contractors got flooded, and that's further down. And a lot of the houses, on that lower end of Main Street, yeah, down by the dairy. They really got amazing, yeah. So, all right, other questions of the commissioner? We're a little behind here, so I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
No, if you, I'm all set unless you have questions.
Well, thank you
You know
for
where to
your
reach
work
me.
and glad to the rollout of
Yeah, we run tank holes.
the Senate obviously has been a supporter of. moving
Yes, you
in this
have
direction,
for a long
so,
time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you
thanks so
very
much.
Maybe you could bet on the number of times that we looked up at. Oh, maybe. That's what-
Not legal,
Not legally.
not in Vermont.
So we have I'm going to go offline because we have a few minutes, break and